The question was simple, because after all, this was Seinfeld. Had he watched Melrose Place? Jerry's refusal to admit that he had is hardly in the same company as conspiracy theories raging in Republican circles with regard to the recent presidential election. Accusations against their own appointed and elected Republicans who have overseen the process in various states. Perhaps most notable among them is Christopher Krebs, Mr. Trump's Director of Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security for the Department of Homeland Security. Accusations which have risen so far beyond anything even remotely plausible that it leaves heads spinning. There's more than a touch of irony in the fact that on one hand, Mr. Trump is firing people for not supporting his claims, while on the other hand, his campaign is having to distance itself from people like Sidney Powell, who is supporting Trump's claims in the extreme. Ms. Powell is an attorney who, according to Trump, would be, quote, the centerpiece of his legal team. She's been saying what Mr. Trump wants to hear, that he won the election by a landslide. The overwhelming evidence to the contrary has forced some prominent Republicans to disavow her claims. And on Sunday afternoon, the Trump campaign team released a statement saying that Powell is now practicing law on her own, is not a member of the Trump legal team, and is not a lawyer for the president. So you get fired for not towing the party line, and you get dismissed when you do. And still millions of people put their faith in conspiracy theories and are letting themselves be convinced that Joe Biden did not win, that Biden could not possibly have won unless there is some nationwide voter fraud. Well, back to Jerry for a moment. On his way to taking the lie detector test, which will ultimately determine the truth or falsehood of his statement, he decides to consult with his friend George. George is a man Jerry describes as, quote, one of the most deceitful, duplicitous, deceptive minds of our time. Remember now, Seinfeld aired prior to the ascendancy of the Trump administration. Well, pressed by Jerry for advice on how to beat the lie detector machine, George demurs. Jerry, he says, it's like saying to Pavarotti, teach me to sing like you. Assuming he's on his own, Jerry slips out of the booth at the coffee shop and heads for the door. But just before he reaches the door, his friend comes through for him. Jerry, calls out George, just remember, it's not a lie if you believe it. Faith, says the Christian Testament, is confident assurance concerning what we hope for and conviction about things we do not see. In other words, what we believe has incredible power in our lives. It can inspire us to live with the certainty that we are, each of us, loved by a God whose existence we cannot prove. It can also lead us into falling into step behind a leader who has lied to us some 20,000 times over the last 4 years. For so many of the millions of Americans who support Donald Trump, or perhaps it's more accurate to say those who believe in Donald Trump, to accept the fact that he's lying leaves his supporters less with an ethical or political dilemma and more with a crisis of faith. As superficial as George Costanza is, in this particular situation, he is spot on. Faith can be restorative. It has the power to be life-giving, even life-saving. Unfortunately, Believing a lie also has the power to unravel the fragile threads that hold a democracy together. Ultimately, it's neither the truth nor the lie that matters. Ultimately, it's what you believe that counts.